Welcome to the Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. There is so much noise on the interweb these days about what women should and shouldn't be doing when it comes to their fitness and health. Not only is it all too often tied to shame and fixing our bodies, it can also be incredibly detrimental to our health and wellness overall. The Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast sorts through the BS and offers advice and actionable tactile steps to support and build a better relationship to your amazing body through every stage of womanhood. It aims to break the cycle of keeping women in the dark about their extraordinary machines and revolutionize the way we move, eat, and live so that our daughters and our daughters' daughters look in the mirror and feel exactly what they are: fierce, beautiful, and capable of everything. The revolution starts here. Hello, and welcome to the Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. What is happening, everyone? Kinsey here, and I am just, as always, so tickled to be here on the mic with you this fine day. Gosh, let's see. Real fast little life updates before we dive into today's topic, which I'm really pumped to be doing because I've been thinking about it a lot for a long time. It's going over the different modalities. So I came up in group fitness. We'll talk about it later, thinking that that was the cat's meow. And you know what? It still is in many respects. But when it comes to preserving muscle and building muscle, it's not quite it, right? So in my journey in fitness, it's taken me a long time to learn what I hope to save you on the time learning. Did that make sense? As always, or not as always. Again, second week in a row, I forgot to write an intro. Also a little distracted because my dog, who I love, Argo, he's a puppy. He's like 1.5, amazing, wonderful, love him. You might hear him panting. I am home alone with him right now, and he is bored. He is not pleased with me. I accidentally threw his ball over into the other yard, just like we're swinging a miss over and over. So he is just sitting licking my legs nonstop, and I have to keep kind of like moving away nicely. But if there's like a weird pause, just know that I probably had to stop the recording and deal with the puppy. Anywho, other life updates. Gosh, there is kind of a big one. Okay, me, one person. I am pushing the start of our first round of small group personal training until the very first week of November because in my very Kinsey fashion, I can't remember if I talked about this last week, I forgot that this is a 3-month commitment to begin with. So after 3 months, you can go month to month. But the reason that is because I want you to really build that solid foundation of balance and stabilization, strength, endurance, and then hypertrophy so that at the end of 3 months, if you want to go and do your own thing, you'll know that you're moving well and you'll know how to come back to basics. And if you want to stay with me, yeehaw, we can keep going onward and upward to more muscle build and strength and power, etc. However, in that 3-month timeline, I somehow managed to forget that I am getting married. So I do not want to get something started with y'all and then in our 3rd month be like, oh, by the way, I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. So just so that it's fair for everyone getting started so that we can really dive in together, it's going to start on the first week of November. I have also decided, because I've talked to some of my old Los Angeles clients, which is always a delight, who expressed some interest in the program as well, at least for the first round of the small group personal training, the one starting in November, I will be opening 1, maybe 2 online cohorts. So it is going to be live. There is going to be a requirement that we go to sessions together because, again, the point of this is for me to teach you how to move. So you're getting a personal trainer, adjusting your form, slowing your tempo, doing all the things that we don't do when we're on our own. So that's pretty big. I'm not sure if last time we spoke it was still happening in August, but it is now moving to November. In the show notes, I'm going to have a wait list. So if you're even like, it could be cool, commitment-free wait list, drop on. In the meantime, you'll get lots of other fun emails with information to help get you sort of started, learn some things in the meantime. And then when the time rolls around, you'll also have some early bird access complete with bonuses. And who doesn't love a bonus? And again, it's totally commitment-free, so hop on in. Okay. Shall we dive in while my dog seems to be slightly placated? He seems fine. That's a word, right? This week's focus, as I mentioned, is getting clear on the basic differences between different exercise modalities. And like I said, it's one that I've been wanting to do for a while because I've been in the group fitness world for a really long time. And I will say where I currently coach 1 day a week is at Orange Theory. And one thing that I love about it is that they actually do build in good room to strength train. The hard part is getting people to trust how to do it correctly. So they build now space for you to get the amount of weight, the amount of reps, the amount of rest even. But a lot of people were still in the mindset of like, can't stop, won't stop. So they just blow through and keep it an endurance class. So today, my hope is no matter what you do with this information, you know how to adjust your own program so that you're targeting what you'd like your ideal outcome to be, right? Because at the end of the day, this is all about, when we're training, specificity. I also had a session with a client this past week where she had a total aha moment on what it actually felt like to be training for muscle gain. And I was just like, you know what? It's time. We'll talk about that a little later. One of the very first things that you learn when you are getting certified as a personal trainer is, well, through NASM, National Academy of Sports Medicine, is you learn that out of the 5 phases of the NASM OPT model, it's what we take clients through, starting at the beginning, building up each stage, roughly like 4 to 6 weeks, depending on where the client is. Some stages take longer. Sometimes we undulate before. Those stages are stabilization endurance, strength endurance, hypertrophy, maximal strength, and power. Out of those 5, there's actually only one phase that targets the size of your muscles. So it targets muscle growth. And that one's hypertrophy. The rest of those training phases, stabilization endurance, strength endurance, max strength, and power, those are all targeting our nervous system. What? If I was holding this mic, I would drop it. In theory, I mean, I remember reading it, right? Being like, sure, that makes sense, I guess, whatever. But it really, the longer that I'm in practice, the more that I just see it's 100% accurate. Because like I said, for a really long time when I first got started, probably like the first 6 years of my life, I was just doing fitness classes and they were amazing. They were fun. They kept me active. I felt healthy. I felt good, but my body comp never really shifted. I never really put on much more muscle. I never really was able to lift over a certain amount. I didn't even think about it. I remember going to my first CrossFit class and they were doing barbell deadlifts. And the coach was like, okay, Kinsey, put like 105 maybe to start. And I was like, I can't go over 70. And it didn't even occur to me that I would, or why should I? So it has been something that, like I said, has been a slow learning curve for me. I really had to like feel it in my own body and see it now 6 years after that. So I've been here 12 years to really relearn. So like I said, I'm trying to save you time, gorgeous human. And again, at first, when a client starts a new program, especially when they're brand spanking new to fitness, newbie gains are a beautifully real thing. Our body will start to put on muscle and change because for the first time ever or in a while, it's getting brand new input and has to adapt in order to lift load. We see results with body weight. It's awesome. I love it. It's a delight. Yay for newbie gains. However, after about the first 6 months to first year, like I mentioned with my own story, things start to plateau. So when I was new to the game, 100% group fitness, still love it from the bottom of my heart, but I even retested it in the past year when I am personally just doing group fitness, especially when I'm doing a lot of running. My muscle mass really just doesn't move. It just stays after a year of training. So cowabunga. That is one of the big reasons, again, that I pivoted into getting back into small group personal training because, as you know, I just firmly believe that we need to prioritize building muscle as we age, and small group personal training gets the benefits of those group fitness classes because you're with a cohort of 6 people who are, you're 6 total. You get that community, but you also get programming that allows for muscle build, which we'll talk about, as well as detailed attention to your form, so that we're moving well. Early on, just to go back at things that I've learned over the years, I naively thought that if I just kept switching up exercises, muscle confusion would keep clients stimulated enough to help keep getting results. To be fair, that was what I had been brought up in. I had done a lot of like F45s, berries, what's that one called? Base camp, all the like big hitters. So I was like, yeah, like they just every day is like a totally different workout. We never come and repeat. Like that's the ticket. And I was sort of right, but I was also very wrong. So in the last 6 years, maybe I'll just do a podcast on things that I wish I knew to isolate this back when I first started training, just to really maximize results. But the deal is that yes, there is truth to a certain degree of muscle confusion, but we need to be working and revisiting the same major compound movements: squats, deadlifts, chest press, row, shoulder press, because remember what I always say, right? We're building skill sets. And then eventually, once we're moving well, we're building strength on top of that. And if you're coming to a group workout class, the proverbial you, twice a week, and every time you're hitting new stuff, different moves, you're forward lunging there, you're side lunging there, you're transverse lunging there, while your body is getting different stimulus, you're not hitting a movement enough to really learn it, right? And if we're not moving correctly, as I always say, we're kind of just throwing out a big piece of our workout. So these variations of the big compound movements, they can change from cycle to cycle, but ideally we're progressing in these skills before we move on. So like right now, every week I target a front squat and I target a hip thrust. And those are my two big pieces for the next, it's a 4-week program. In 4 weeks, I'll switch up my two big piece movers. The other glaring problem with most group fitness, and I've addressed it in personal or previous podcasts, is that they aren't really designed at all to build muscle after the newbie gain era. Some do better than others, but a lot of times the whole methodology behind the group fitness programs are something along the lines of like make you feel like you got a really good workout. And as a society, we've decided that like when you are dripping sweat, when you are dead on the floor, when you cannot lift your head off the mat, you have gotten a good workout. And there's a lot of problems with that in general because it's a low barrier to entry, but also we are stalling out because we're pretty much living in this endurance territory of go, 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 go. Not lots of recovery, not a lot of opportunity to grow with weights. We'll talk about this more later. But the point is that instead of building muscle, what you're doing is you're training your body to work out for longer and longer periods of time at the expense of stimulating muscle growth, which again, whenever you start a new program, one of the most important things you can do is get very specific what you'd like your outcome to be. And that's going to be my goal today, is to help you at least walk away with an idea of if I want to train A, then I have to do B, C, and D. So to try to simplify this, especially for a podcast version, I'm going to try to break down endurance, hypertrophy, which is muscle gain, max strength, and power into different categories. So we're going to talk about the weight choices. We're going to talk about tempo. We're going to talk about reps, perceived effort, and rest periods. Before I dive in, I do want to mention that when we're talking about endurance, hypertrophy, max strength, power, remember that NASM OPT model I mentioned? These are progressive. We're going to start with balance and stabilization, because if you can't stand on one leg, you better believe your squat's going to be off. And if you're going into power and you can't balance on one leg, things get real wonky real fast. This also, taking it step by step, especially with that balance and stabilization first block, which is why, again, in Fit After 40, we start with a month of that training. It gives us optimal time to clean up our form, to not just move better, but safer. And just to give you an idea of like snapshot as to how much these micro changes can affect things, I had a client today who we were doing chest flies, and she just did the slightest external rotation of her shoulder. So if you were to think of like her hand was pointing slightly forward. She did a little rotation at the shoulder girdle, so her hand was pointing more towards the ceiling so that she could target her pec more. She set her weights down, and I quote, "Holy shit, this is a totally different exercise." We didn't change anything other than a slight less than an inch rotation of her shoulder girdle. So we're literally training you how to move correctly. You know, I've mentioned it before, but this, my friends, is the huge benefit of working with a coach. A lot of times when I'm starting with my clients, they love me, but get very annoyed with how many times I have to adjust their feet, their shoulders. We're literally training your body. It's wild. Coaches don't just motivate you, right? They'll adjust your hands. They'll adjust your feet. They help you learn how to build your strongest foundation so that when you are doing workouts on your own, you've got their little voice in your head correcting those form changes. So after we complete that balance stabilization phase, about 4 to 6 weeks, you get to move on to muscle endurance. So that's can look a lot of different ways. I prefer supersets. Again, muscle endurance, you could get a little bit of this in group fitness classes, building up that work capacity of our muscles while starting to introduce some of those heavier lifts. Not going max strength, but just starting to introduce a little bit more load. Then in that 3rd month, you're off to the races with hypertrophy, muscle build, because you know how to move your body enough so you're targeting your muscles correctly and not wasting your time, maximizing, optimizing your lifts. But I digress. The point is, it goes in phases, so don't try to skip a step. Let's just jump in right away by breaking down the different styles of training, starting with what I think is the most mind-blowing, so I didn't even mention it, but the main stimulus in a trained individual. So when I say trained individual, someone who's been training for a year or more, let's just say. So when we are training endurance, we're training the nervous system. When we're training hypertrophy, we're changing the size of your muscle fibers, building muscle. When we're training max strength, we're training your nervous system. When we're training power, we're training your nervous system. What? So why the H would we even work on building strength if it doesn't directly stimulate muscle growth in a trained individual? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because eventually your body over time is going to adapt to the weights you're using in your hypertrophic lifting. And as we build strength, it opens us up to being able to safely move heavier weight options in those higher rep ranges. Again, remember how I said that I've got a couple different compound moves that I work? So every one of my workouts starts out with a compound strength move, and then the rest of my workout moves into more hypertrophic lifting. Anyway, in terms of power, remember too that we lose power even more than we lose muscle as we age. We want to train it, but I'm not saying that you have to go out and throw around 150, 300 pound power cleans, although that'd be pretty dope, right? Because nothing makes me feel more badass than a power clean. However, it could look like sprint intervals on a bike where you're going 30 seconds as hard as you can. You're absolutely winded. Then you get 2 full minutes to recover. After we talk about these 4 types of training, we'll dive in just a little bit to the differences between true HIIT, high intensity interval training, and, marketed HIIT. Okay, moving along. When we're talking about weight choices, I'm going to be referencing 1 rep maxes. These are, if you know them, it's not safe to whip out a 1 rep max when you're new. Even as you've been doing it for a while, most programs won't train 1 rep maxes unless that's something you're specifically working on with your coach. So a good way to find it is finding your 3 rep max, your 5 rep max, your 10 rep max. There are a lot of different charts online that can convert. Like if I can do 10 chest presses at 35 pounds, it'll show me what I could do if I could only do 1 rep. So it gives you an idea of how to start working these percentages. And if the percentages don't make sense, just ignore me for now. Listen to what works, leave what doesn't. So when we're talking that endurance phase, thinking like medium weights, right? If we're going to go off that estimated 1 rep max, like 40 to 70% of what that 1 rep max is. So if my 1 rep max is 100 pounds, I'm lifting 40 to 70 pounds. For hypertrophy, we're thinking medium heavy to heavy. Again, if we're going off that 1 rep max and I can lift 100 pounds for something at 1 rep, that means that I'm looking for weights that are 75 to 90 pounds. So a lot heavier than endurance, yeah? Max strength, we're looking for, as the name suggests, heavy weights, like 85 to 95% of that 1 rep max. Obviously, if you're doing a 1 rep max, which can fall into this max strength category, you're going for 100%, quick maths. But again, pretty rarely do those come up in regular training. It might be something that you and your trainer decide to focus on. I love that. It is fun if you're ready for it. It can feel pretty empowering to hit a 1 rep max. But I find with the majority of my clients, it, like I said, generally feels safer to explore more of those 3, 5, 10 rep max. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about tempo. Tempo is how quickly or slowly we are moving a weight against gravity. Generally, they're written as number dash number dash number. All that means is it's going to be the first number listed when you see those is going to be your eccentric movement. So we're going to get a little sciencey. Eccentric is when that muscle is re-lengthening. So if I were bicep curling, it would be as my hand is returning to the side of my body. The middle number is going to be the isometric. So the amount of time you spend holding the muscle in the top of the contraction. So if I'm talking bicep curl, the middle number, the isometric, is going to be while the bicep is curled and the hand is at my shoulder. And then that last number is going to be the concentric movement, or the shortening of the muscle. So in my bicep curl, it would be bringing my fist up towards my shoulder. So if, for example, the number said 4, 2, 1, I would be finding that bicep curl would be a 1. That would be my concentric. I'd hold at the top of the curl for 2 seconds, and I'd find my eccentric or lower the bell for 4 seconds. Not surprisingly, that is our endurance lift. So when we're building muscular endurance, I should say again, this can go a couple different ways. According to NASM, the preferred preferences, so like if I'm, let's say, building endurance with my bicep curls, I would do 3 rounds of, well, this will get into the weeds, 12 to 20 reps, 30 to 60 second break. And as I'm bicep curling, I'll curl for 1, I'll hold for 2, I'll release for 4. So 4 seconds of lengthening, 2 seconds of holding, 1 second of the curling. However, endurance, especially when we're talking more about group fitness classes, a lot of times this tempo looks like something like up for 1, down for 1, or pulsing. So if you've ever taken a bar class, think of those bar arms. As a side note, I just want to say in hindsight, it seems very cruel that you are working out for 6 minutes without ever dropping your arms, and it doesn't necessarily build muscle, okay? That feels like a mean thing I wish I would have known, so save yourself some time. Tempo for hypertrophy, again, options. NASM describes it as 2-0-2, so for that bicep curl, we're curling up for 2, we're not holding, 0 at the isometric, and down for 2. Up for 2, down for 2. But there's another school of thought too that says control the speed on the eccentric, and quick with the concentric, slow with the eccentric. So think like up for 1, down for 4. So kind of keeping with that strength endurance, but minus the hold. So basically, as long as you're fighting time under tension, you're forcing those muscles to work, hence forcing them to adapt. Max strength, similar to what I pitched as the second option for hypertrophy, your focus is moving the weight with maximum force through your concentric, so quick curl, but because the weight is so heavy, you feel like you're moving as fast as you can safely, but to the person watching, you're not really moving that fast, right? Because you're moving a pretty darn heavy load. The eccentric, or that lowering phase, is again controlled. Maybe not as slow, maybe you're thinking that too, but you're not just dropping it to the ground. And we are getting rid of the pause. For power, everything is as explosive as possible. We are just go, 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 which again is why power is the very last phase, because we're not going to just blow through things when we don't have control over our body. Okay, so now we're getting into reps. Thinking about, remember, reps are the amount of times we do an exercise in a set. So for endurance, generally that rep range is around 12 to 20. Hypertrophy, generally around 8 to 12 is what it's written in most programs. So I'm just going to throw it out there because I know there's going to be pushback if I don't. Not gospel, right? Plenty of research that shows you can get it in even higher rep zones as long as you're coming into close proximity of failure by your last rep. So think that by the time you hit that last rep, and we'll talk about the perceived effort next, you really could only do 1 to 2 more reps. So if I did 10 bicep curls, I couldn't do more than 12. If you could keep going to like 15, 16, then you're still lifting an endurance amount of weight. But the point here is that you could technically do 30 reps of something. And if you come into that proximity to failure where you're like 1 to 2 reps left in the tank, then yeah, you can build muscle. But I will say, Carly and I literally had a high rep hypertrophy block at the end of our workout this morning to the tune of 30 leg extensions, and it's actually the worst. And I just want to die. It also personally, it just takes so long. So you're just like working for so long, and I maybe got a little mad, but like in a good way. But also like it's fun to mix up once in a while. But if my full program was having to hit close to failure at 30 reps, I would never work out again. So that's just my thing. The point is though, is you could do it, but really be honest. Because that's like the whole thing when you hear like, don't pick up the pink weights. If those pink weights, first of all, pink is great. If those pink weights make you feel like dying by 30 reps, you couldn't even lift your arm one more time, then that works. But again, if you're getting to like 30 reps and you could go for 32, 35, 40, forever and ever, the weights aren't high enough to stimulate that muscle growth. For our reps in our max strength range, we're looking for 1 to 6 reps. So we've dropped way low. And for power, again, it's going to depend. If we're looking for those heavier barbell movements, like a barbell clean, you're going for the same one as max strength, about 1 to 6 reps. If you're supersetting with a strength move, probably closer to like 6 to 10 reps. Again, it's going to depend on your body and your programming, but there's a little bit of wiggle room. Okay, perceived effort by the end of the set. So how should you be feeling after you've lifted one set of this workout? Endurance. I would say you should feel like moderate, you're worked, but like maybe not totally dead. Generally, this is the phase where you could probably keep going for longer, like maybe another 5 reps. I'll be honest, I've never really heard people talk about perceived effort for endurance other than like running, which is like when you get to the end of the run, you could still keep running. That's probably because generally when we're training endurance, we end up feeling more fatigued just by the length of time we're working and the lack of rest. So like when you think about circuit training, for example, you're shifting quickly between exercises. So like your heart's beating really fast and you're getting really high, like higher in your heart rate zone. Your lungs are working really hard. But if we were to peel back those quick bounces between the chest presses with bicycle legs and the renegade rows and the sit up with the twist and the squat to thrust, and we were just to isolate them one at a time, chances are that the prime movers of the muscles you were working wouldn't really need to be fatigued. We're just stopping because we're feeling tired from such nonstop work. So our body, our system, our nervous system is fatigued, but the individual muscle groups aren't. The other thing with group fitness that can make it hard to build muscle is there's a lot of compound movements where it's like squat to curl or lunge to press. And again, if we're training like stability, this can be a fun practice. But when we're looking to build muscle, if you're doing something like a squat to press, your legs are way stronger than your shoulders, hopefully, right? I mean, hey, maybe there's someone out there who's like, my shoulders are so jacked though that my quads can't even keep up. But the point is that like maybe you tap out on your shoulder presses at like, let's just say 20, but your squats need significantly heavier, right? If we're being honest. So you might get a good shoulder workout, but your legs don't really benefit from it. And even then, maybe you're getting an okay shoulder workout because you're not even doing strict presses. Point is, it can get kind of in the weeds, or like a deadlift to row. Our backs are far less strong than our glutes and hamstrings. It's just the way it is. So just one thing to keep in mind also, if you're doing your own programming, they look really cute. And there's a place, like I said, when you're doing nervous system training. So in the beginning stages, especially for like stability, if you're doing some sort of lunge or step up variation with the curl press, there's a place for everything. But when you're trying to build muscle, when you're trying to get those body comp goals, eventually we have to really isolate the prime mover and make sure that if we're trying to strengthen our legs, that we are picking movements and weights that are targeting our legs. I hope that made sense. Okay, so what is our perceived effort by the end of hypertrophy? By the end of a hypertrophy lift, kind of like I mentioned before, we want to have like 1 to 2 reps left in the tank. Different client today picked up a weight that I knew she could do more than 12 reps with. So when she got to her 12th rep, I said, just for fun, I want you to keep shoulder pressing. I will tell you when your form breaks down so that we don't lift unsafely. But just for kicks and giggles, Let's go ahead and see how many more reps you can get. And she ended up getting to 17. And the reason I had her do that is, yes, I could have given her a heavier weight, but she might have pulled back a little early. The reason I had her do that was because a lot of times until we've felt that level of effort, we have no idea what it's supposed to feel like. Another example is my mom and I have started training together, and it is the best moment of my life. She is just like the dream client. You're like, do this. And she's like, okay. And you're like, fix this. And she's like, okay, thank you. I just am obsessed. She is my hero. Anywho, Dilly, we had her on the leg extension. We were doing single leg quad extensions. And she had a very similar thing where we stayed within her rep range, but she got to her 8th rep and she's like, this is so hard. And I was like, what happens if you go to 10? And she's like, I don't know if I can. She got to 10 and she's like, maybe I could do one more, but I think I'm going to die. I was like, great, this is your stop. She was like, oh my God, I've never felt that before. I was like, I know. It's pretty amazing, right? She's like, yeah, but I'm going to be so sore. I was like, are you? And then we moved on to upper body because we were doing frontline. And she stopped after one of her chest presses. She was resting and she looked at me and she goes, you know what I just realized? I was like, what, Mom? You amazing human being. She's like, my legs aren't sore. I was like, I know. We have to train ourselves that it's okay to safely reach challenging efforts. And again, without getting there, it's really hard to know that we can or what it should even feel like. One of the things that I love about the example with my mom, like obviously I love my client with the shoulder press too, what a baddie. But what I like about my mom, especially when it comes to people who are newer to fitness, especially when it comes to people who are working out on their own and trying to explore what this like 1 to 2 reps left feels like, is that she was using a leg extension machine, which is a very safe way to push intensity. In a squat, for example, we're using way more joints, way more muscles, way more balance, way more nervous system control, right? Because remember, the goal of she and I are in her balance and stabilization phase. So our goal is to teach her how to build solid foundations of a safe squat. So right now, it wouldn't be safe to throw a ton of weight on her and be like, great, now let's just keep back squatting until you can't. Her form would break down first, right? And she wouldn't really get to feel what I was looking for with the intensity in her muscles. In the leg extension, however, you're seated, you're able to brace through your core, and you are only isolating through the quad. So really, the only joint you're moving is that knee joint, and it's generally in a safe position once you set it up to, again, push for intensity. So it's a fun way. If you're on your own, you're not really sure what it feels like. Going to failure with arms is another good way. Like if you go to bicep curls until you literally cannot lift your arm, arms are pretty good ones to burn out. Again, just to sort of teach your brain what that burning sensation feels like and how it's different than pain. Because again, burning and work are different than pain, right? We want you to be safe, but we also want you to be challenged. Anyway, for max strength, I'm going to say again for safety, because again, unless you're working with your coach for 1 rep maxes, most programs aren't designed around that. We're looking again for the same thing as hypertrophy, where we're going for 1 to 2 reps left in the tank. So how is max strength different than hypertrophy then? Remember that max strength is significantly shorter rep range. When we were looking at hypertrophy, I told you could do anywhere from 8 to 30 as long as you were that 1 to 2 away from failure. Remember that max strength is 1 to 6 reps. So we're looking for that failure much quicker because we've got a lot more load that we're moving. And then for power, again, for safety, I'm going to say the same thing. I'm going to say 1 to 2 reps left in reserve, again, unless you're working on a 1 rep max with a coach and it's in your program. Perceived exertion, I just want to say, I think can be kind of frustrating. Do not get caught in the weeds. Remember, we are exploring our bodies. We are learning about it. And I promise you, the more you move your body, the further along you get into your program, the more your perceived exertion will develop with time. It's another really nice reason to work with a coach because eventually you'll develop the trust where you know your coach won't let you work to a point of injuring yourself. So you're really able to push limits a little bit. The more you train, the safer you're going to feel moving also, especially when it comes to load. And like I mentioned, a lot of us just haven't experienced that level of effort. I know I hadn't. Remember how I said I could never go above 70 pounds on my deadlift? That was incorrect. But again, firsthand experience, I get it. It's definitely a little daunting, especially if we have a history of injury or we just, again, are new to this world. One great way, just to reiterate, to check the weight you should be using is that method that I mentioned above, where you go until you can't move the load without proper form. Again, good reminders on that are like a bicep curl, because you're pretty safe. Your form's probably going to break, but at least you're getting the sensation in the muscle. And then machines can be pretty safe for breaking that or hitting that threshold as well. Another fun way, just to keep exploring, if we're closer to that failure or closer to failure, is to film ourselves or watch ourselves in the mirror. But honestly, filming, because sometimes we're really present, and I hope we are. If you're not moving at least a little bit slower by your last rep, or it doesn't look like it's any harder than your first rep, probably it's a good sign that you can either increase your reps or increase your weights depending on where you are in your programming. So hypertrophy could go either way. Strength, you're probably going to want to go up in weight a little bit. I also think it's an interesting thing to note as a sidebar. This maybe is for those of us who are a little bit more trained, but remember that the more we train, the more specificity is required. So if you're doing 4 sets of barbell squats and you don't really start feeling that 1 to 2 reps left until your 3rd set, those first 2 sets are essentially warming up to your working sets. So instead of doing 4 working sets, you're only doing 2. And I heard that today and I was like, oh, I know. But also maybe my first 2 sets of squats were warm-ups today. And that's okay too. But just to keep in mind that we do want to make sure that our working sets are those sets where we're working to that point of perceived almost failure. Okay, we're coming to the end. Rest periods between our sets. So for endurance, it depends on the circumstance. When you are working with moi in that balance stabilization endurance phase, so where we're really, again, just working one movement for that 12 to 20 reps, slower tempo, we're resting anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds, depending on how new you are to fitness. If it's your first day, we're going to be taking those rests because your body needs it. There's plenty of time to shorten the rests. Also, fun fact, when you're thinking of progressive overload, which is what we need to continue to force adaptation, invite adaptation upon our body, one way to progress in certain phases is to lower your rest time. So I would say for endurance and for hypertrophy, lowering your rest time can be ways to progress. Max strength and power, which we'll get to, do not do that. You need your rest. Okay, the other way in endurance is something when we're approaching it like a group fitness class, right? Since those classes are primarily endurance classes, if you've ever done one before and you think about the format of the class, generally there's very few breaks, or if they are, they're very limited, right? So maybe they're 20 seconds, 15 seconds, or just the amount of time it takes to switch between exercises. So short breaks. That's the other style of rest for endurance. And again, generally in a group fitness class. When we're looking at hypertrophy or building muscle, generally the rule of thumb is around 30 to 60 seconds between sets, because we're looking to really tax the muscle and force it to adapt by creating that metabolic stress and not giving it a ton of time to snap back, right? I personally generally live in the sweet spot of 45 seconds. There have been training periods where I've just been like ready to go and rocked that 30-second rest. And there are these days even more times, or depending on my cycle, self-care moments that look like taking the full 60, but between that 30 and 60, because again, we don't want to give your muscles so much rest that it has had time to sort of fully recover, if I'm just being honest. Max strength, this is where we get into why I love max strength, 2 to 5 minutes. And a lot of the research is going to say 3 to 5 minutes. Yep. Enjoy it. This is one of the biggest mind F's ever. If you're like me and you're coming from group fitness and you're like, but wait, the amount of times I've had to like force clients to sit down and be like, it is okay to sit here. In fact, you need to. Why? Because we are letting our nervous system chill, for one, because remember, max strength, we're training our nervous system to move heavier loads. And we're also replenishing ourselves, because remember, the goal is to maximize force output when we're working with strength. So we want to be fully rested before starting again. We do not want to have even a little bit of fatigue or it gets in our way. We also need this time to allow for the recovery of our ATP-PC system, which we won't get into the weeds on, but is the primary energy source when lifting heavy weights in that short duration, high intensity way. So as we look at power, we're going to look at the exact same setup as max strength. Long rest, 2 to 5 minutes. Again, most research will say 3 to 5 for same reasons. Nervous system and restoring energy system after those short duration, high intensity outputs. And so that you're really moving safely, right? Because power, we're whipping things around fast and we should be in control of every single millisecond of that output. So like everything is nervous system. Does that mean we can't do anything but hypertrophy then to build weight or to build muscles? No, honey child. Remember, all of these work together. In a good training program, you're going to be undulating phases. I just love that word, undulating phases. Bodies continually need to be rebalanced, for example. So going back to that strength and endurance phase, or the stabilization and balance, whether it's maybe just rinsing the cycle, maybe you came out of a race season, so you're going to do a full month, or maybe you are just training for life. So you will work in balance stabilization every couple of weeks or once a week or in your warm-ups. But I will say, the reason I call this out is because my biggest personal injury was as a result of leaving balance stabilization training in the dust. I had like a year prior found CrossFit. I was loving throwing heavy weights around. I was also starting to run because I was training for obstacle courses, and I just forgot to touch back into basics. Right leg fired just a little faster than my left, and boom, there goes my back. So again, let my mistakes be your lessons, right? That's the other benefit of working with a coach. We oftentimes have gone through all the things so you don't have to. My current program, as I mentioned, just as another example of how this could work, always starts with that heavy compound lift. So I get to continue working on strength in my skill movements. And then the rest of my workout, I prioritize hypertrophic lifting. And some of them will end with a little bit of like an endurance metcon, where it's 6 to 8 minutes of nonstop movement. So you're getting a little bit of a lot of things. I also like to do Orange Theory, obviously. I love it. So I'll do some days 3 days of my strength training, 2 days of Orange Theory. Sometimes I'll do Muay Thai. It can all mix in, right? It's also worth noting, again, I think I mentioned it before, but just to throw it out, some people may never opt to move on to the max power phase as we sort of talked about it. So like the power cleans or even like the supersets into the explosive movements. And honestly, I'm fine with that. I do, though, want us to be conscious of making sure to incorporate some sort of HIIT training, ideally once a week. And this is a huge conversation. Dr. Stacy Sims talks about it all the time. Honestly, if you look up, well, I'll try to find resources because there's a lot of trash out there too. Point is, big conversation. So I'm just going to like scratch the surface on what true HIIT is versus marketed HIIT. And again, here's another mistake I made early on in my fitness career. I not only thought, but also marketed my fitness gym as high intensity interval training. It was early on it was when HIIT was a fad. It was not out of a malicious intent. We truly thought that's what it was. We're like shorter workouts, maximum results. And the truth is that group fitness classes, like we said, are endurance. HIIT looks very, very different. So what does it look like? Just again, little bit of surface scratch. And then this blew my mind too. Not anymore, but it did at the time. We're talking short bursts of all out, leave nothing on the table, high intensity, followed by long periods of rest. So think about it like when we were talking about power, right? When we were talking about power, we were going 1 to 6 reps as heavy as we could safely and then resting for 3 to 5 minutes. So your working amount of time was maybe clocking in at 45 seconds, probably even faster depending on what you were doing. So you were getting like a 1 to something crazy rest. So some examples would be if you wanted to explore. 8 rounds on an assault bike, so that air assault bike. 8 rounds of 15-second all out, flat all out, everything you got, leave it on the table sprint, followed by 60 seconds of recovery. So just like chill or sit. And honestly, that 1 to 4, that might even be a little bit short of a recovery, but that's a good starting place if you're short on time. Another option is 10 rounds of 30-second flat all-out sprints on a stationary bike, followed by 3 to 4 minutes of active, easy recovery. 10 rounds of 30-second all-out, flat out on the battle ropes, followed by 90 seconds to 2 minutes of recovery. So again, when I say all out here, I mean like you get to the end of that sprint interval and you are like you barely make it, right? You have 0 gas left in the tank, which is why you didn't hear me say any running options. I just think that for the average person, there's a limiting factor of A, really being able to move fast enough to make it count, and B, more importantly, even if you can, it's a higher risk of injury. So if you love that, do it, but that's why I didn't offer it. If you're finishing, say, that 15-second bike sprint feeling like you could keep going, you get to up your intensity and that rest. I told you it's crazy long, but again, we're resting that nervous system. We're restoring ATP. We're resting our body enough that we have 100% energy to go all out on our next sprint interval. Also, training our bodies to go from 0 to 60 is a major part of power training. So you're really letting it wind down and then ramping it right on up. It's that get up and go that we're going to try to maintain as we age. So group fitness is endurance. How is that different than what I just talked about? A, those classes are about 45 to 60 minutes long, right? You should not be able to do HIIT, high intensity interval training, for 45 to 60 minutes. If you can go for that long, you're in an endurance phase. B, I'm so happy for you to reach out and tell me if you found something that is different than this. But as far as I've seen in my entire career in this world, there just isn't rest integrated, and certainly not enough rest. And fair, because that would probably make the general population of people coming into class who are just trying to, like, quote unquote, get a good workout, probably make them feel confused, probably feel a little bored. And again, a lot of group fitness classes are banking on really wearing you out so you feel like you got a really good workout. And that is really empowering. There's something to be said for getting done with a class and being like, damn, I'm amazing. But what are we training there? We're training your ability to work for long periods of time. We're not giving our body time to go max and then rest and then max. So they are completely different things. Most of the time, HIIT will be anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. So again, I'm not poo-pooing group fitness. I love group fitness. It is a big part of my world still, at least 1 to 2 workouts a week. My pitch is that you just don't make the mistake that I did, thinking that you were building muscle, especially as we get to perimenopause and beyond, and everything we do is so critical. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like, point is, don't waste your time, right? If we're looking to build and preserve muscle, we have to train accordingly. We have to train with those heavy weights, thinking 70 to 90% of that 1 rep. We have to control our eccentric tempo when we're re-lengthening the muscle. We're resting 30 to 60 seconds in between. And every time we lift, we are going until we could do but 1 or 2 more reps. And that is what we've got to be doing. And I should mention, if you're like, I'm still confused, you're only doing 1 exercise at a time when you're doing hypertrophy. I mean, there's room for supersets, but to keep it simple for today, think of 1 exercise at a time. So I'm doing 4 sets of bicep curls, 30 to 60 second rest, 10 to 12 reps. I finish with just 1 to 2 more reps in my tank, and I'm controlling the lower of my bicep to challenge the lengthening of my muscle. This is kind of a challenging one to do over a podcast. So please feel free to reach out and ask any follow-up questions. Feel free to ask for videos. If there's anything that can help this sort of sink in or show a little bit, like show examples, any way that I can help really solidify this. Because like I said, it is really confusing. It's interesting because I'll even have conversations with people who have been training for a long time in the group fitness world. And similar to where I was at 6 years ago, it's kind of mind blowing. So like when I'm onboarding new trainers and trying to teach them the difference between endurance and strength, it kind of can break a brain, right? Like it's confusing that I can lift really heavy and it doesn't necessarily build muscle, or I can lift nonstop for 45 minutes, feel super tired, and it doesn't necessarily build muscle. So it is a lot to take in, and it's a lot to relearn. And to reiterate, early on, newbie gains are going to take you a long way no matter what you're doing. But if fitness is a lifelong journey, and hopefully it is for all of us, eventually we're going to have to get more strategic with the way that we're programming. Again, exactly why I felt so passionate about bringing together the small group personal training program, Fit After 40. I want you to learn how to move well. I want you to learn the difference between endurance and hypertrophic lifting so you aren't wasting your precious time. So you aren't feeling frustrated or plateaued, or even worse, blaming yourself, or even worse, deciding fitness isn't for you. Because that's the other thing with classes that make you feel exhausted. A lot of us don't want to just come in and feel exhausted, right? So that right there, if you're like, I've never done fitness because those classes look so tiring, I got good news. You're going to feel worked, but remember how much rest we get in these other phases? That was one of the first things that really turned me on to strength training. I was like, hold up, I get how much rest? Anywho, Dilly, this is for you, right? It's critical for all of us, especially as we hit perimenopause phase and beyond, that we know what we're doing, or we can learn what we're doing. And that's my goal for you, is after the 3 months together, like I said, obviously I want you to stick around forever, but my goal is that you walk away knowing what you're doing, feeling confident walking into a gym, not just with a program you know is going to get you the results you want, but moving your body through that program from every foot position to every shoulder position to every rib position, knowing that you're optimizing your lift because you know what you're doing. If you're interested in learning more about our November group of our Fit After 40 small group personal training cohorts, please again drop down into the show notes where you can get on that commitment-free wait list. Not only are you going to get lots of fun learning materials in the meantime, I'm not just going to leave you hanging. You'll also get an exclusive waitlist only early bird access with bonuses. If you're in the Twin Cities, good news, we're doing it live and in person, and I can't wait. But fret not. If you're out of state or not in the Twin Cities area, I got you. I've come to the firm decision after chatting with my ladies in Los Angeles that at least for this first round of the cohort, I'm going to see how it works to run 1 or 2 live online cohorts to take you through the first 3 months. So that balance stabilization, that muscle endurance, and that hypertrophy, those will just be online, or as of right now, they're just 3-month commitments. And afterwards, you go forth into the world. If you want to keep working together online, we can talk when that time comes. But that way you, like I said, have completed it feeling confident and having the education to keep going on your own. Those are going to be a requirement that we meet in person because, again, like I mentioned, I want to make sure that you are moving correctly. Point is, we all deserve this. We all deserve to move well. We all deserve to have that life-preserving muscle. We just deserve it. Oakley dokley. Like I said, we surface scratched a lot of stuff here. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Comments, questions. I wrote concerts, but I meant concerns. If you want to reach out with a concert too, get after it, baby. And please, if you got something out of this episode, as always, like, comment, share, take 8 seconds to review. I haven't gotten a click on even the 5 stars lately, so it would really mean a lot. That just gives me information that you're getting what you want to hear, and B, it helps. The more that this podcast gets reviews and stars, the more the algorithm goes, oh, people are getting things out of it. And that way it can find its way as a free resource to women who are just like you, looking to take care of their amazing bodies, minus the BS of diet culture. And honestly, these days, like a lot of online fitness culture that are just trying to like sell them phony programs and supplements that end up making us feel like trash. So anywho, dilly, thank you so much, as always, for your time. I cannot tell you how much it meant to me. If you have any questions, reach out to me, kinsey.diamond@gmail.com or Instagram, kinsey.does.the.fitness. And I cannot wait to hear from you. Have a beautiful rest of the day. And in the meantime, take care of your beautiful bodies. You're so worth it. Until next time, aroo!